I started reading this book last winter and it is now fall. It is fall and I have just finished it. Hello fiction fiends, my name's Sonia and I write, and welcome to the first ever episode of my spoiler-free book review series where I review some of my most recent reads completely spoiler-free so that you know if you should or should not add them to your TBR. Today we're talking about my most recent completed book, SCARLET by Marissa Meyer. This is the second book in the Lunar Chronicle series. It is a YA sci-fi that puts a crazy twist on classic fairy tales. So let's get into discussing whether you should read or not read SCARLET by Marissa Meyer. Chapter 1, First Impressions. So while the honest truth as to why I picked up this book series is solely because of the covers, because even in the first book of the series, Cinder, the cover looks so cool, I seriously am so glad that I picked it up for the cover, because the plot, I will say, is something that I was not only surprised by, but also something that I really, really enjoyed. SCARLET picks up right after the first book, Cinder, and while this one introduces a new protagonist, Scarlett, the fierce French farm girl with a missing grandmother and a serious temper, we also get alternate chapters from Cinder's POV, and if you liked Cinder in book 1, you'll be happy to know she's back and still kicking. I loved Cinder in book 1, and I was a little bit afraid we wouldn't be able to see her any longer, but yes, she is in book 2. This book balances two storylines, obviously Scarlett's hunt for her missing grandmother and Cinder's prison escapade as she tries to figure out her identity and where she belongs in the world. Now, by the end of the SCARLET book, while we have two POVs running throughout the entirety of the novel, they end up coming together in the last 100 pages or so, and spoiler-free opinion here, I think that when the POVs come together, finally in that last chunk of reading, it makes the entire story worth it. I loved seeing Cinder and Scarlett together. It was probably my favorite part of the entire book. Chapter 2, What I Liked. One of the things that really impressed me about the SCARLET story was the pacing. I was really happy with the pacing, and I was really happy with the fact that there were no 3 days have passed and sort of ominous silence to follow. One of my writing or reading peeves, I should say, is when we get a really good description of what is happening in the plot, and it's almost like a super close-up of the things that are going on at the time, and we're almost reading minute by minute, and then all of a sudden it's like 4 days have passed and things have been hard, but here's where we are now. And that doesn't happen in SCARLET. The pacing moves very steadily, and at no point was I confused as to what POV I was reading and at what point in the plot I was reading it at, if that makes sense. The second part that I really liked about SCARLET was the multiple POVs. Sometimes there are POVs in stories where there's a character that I don't like, but I simply can't skip the POV because what they're saying is important to the plot, and I will be completely lost if I just pass up that chapter by. But all of these chapters I found really interesting, and especially Scarlett and Cinder's POVs. Cinder, especially in this book, was super, super interesting to read through, and I really like how the POVs didn't feel like they were going on too long or lasting too short. Marissa Meyer juggles them perfectly, and I think just when I felt like I needed a break from one character, the next character's POV showed up, so it was perfect timing. And last but not least, what I really enjoyed was the characters. Now, coming from the fact that this is a fairy tale retelling, the first book being a Cinderella retelling, the second book being a Little Red Riding Hood retelling, I thought a lot of the characters would fall into really deep cliches and almost be very static in who their identities are. But in this story, we saw a lot of growth, and there was actually a lot of humor to ease some of that deep tension, which I really, did enjoy. I was really fearful that we were going to get some forced humor, but the humor felt light and airy, and it came at the right times. There wasn't a character cracking jokes when that didn't need to happen. And I especially loved the characters Thorn, Scarlet, Cinder, and Eco. Those are my favorites. So if you do give this book a read, look out for those characters and let me know your opinions on them as well. Chapter 3. What didn't work for me? So there were some aspects of the Scarlet story that I really, really loved, and then there were some aspects of the Scarlet story that made me lean my preference toward liking the first book and the first set of characters more. So all the characters from the first book, Cinder. And the reason for that comes from the romance. So with regard to romance, let's talk about slow burns and forest fires. I'm more of a slow burn, multi-book long romance that blossoms from mistrust and misery and flowers into something beautiful but slow. The romance that Scarlet experiences in her book is what I like to call a forest fire. It starts small but erupts quickly and skips any small talk and flickering flames. It's blazing heat straight away. Some people love a quickly burning romance, and Scarlet's relationship with her love interest escalates very quickly, like really fast. It gives me a bit of emotional whiplash, but I could understand how, in a way, it does sort of feel semi-realistic. Teenagers do dive into things like relationships head first, but it feels a little cliche at times. Meanwhile, I appreciate how Cinder and Prince Kai's relationship from the first book is explored at a much slower burn, a much slower pace, if you will. That contrast made the romance in Scarlet's POV feel even more fast-tracked by comparison. Now, I wouldn't say that the romance was too in your face, but it was obvious enough that from the first I would say maybe like 5 or 6 chapters, you could get a very quick gist of who the love interest was going to be and how their romance would proceed throughout the story with Scarlet. So with that in mind, take that when think about that when looking into reading Scarlet by Marissa Meyer. Chapter 4, should you read it? And my rating. So, should you read Scarlet? If you're someone who loves fairy tale retellings with a sci-fi twist, enjoys multiple POVs and incorporated plots, likes fast-paced reads with character-driven chaos, or needs a strong female lead with attitude and grit, then yes, Scarlet is probably exactly your jam and exactly what you need to be reading next. However, if you don't fancy super fast-paced plots and you like a more slow read coming with slower romance and slower action, this might not be the book for you. As for me, I'm giving Scarlet a 3.75 out of 5 stars on my book rating account on Fable. Now, I honestly nearly dropped this book. I nearly DNF'd it. I had so much to do. I had so much to do, and Scarlet wasn't screaming for my attention at some points, but when I made it to the 300 page mark, I was locked in. I was laser focused, and the reason for that is because the POVs all interconnected. They came together at the very ending of the book. I think it was the 325 mark where my laser focus, I was locked in, and then it was the 380 page mark where I went into my room, I closed the door, and I said, "Hey family, I'm finishing this book, don't bother me, it's intense now." So honestly, the biggest thumbs up for this book, the biggest part of the book that I loved was when all of the characters finally came together at the end. It was my favorite part. It was so intense. I can't wait to read Cress now. Cress is the next book in the Lunar Chronicles, and I'm beyond excited to get started because I really do hope that we get more interconnected POVs. There's already been some hints poking at Cress's character and what she is going to be like. But yeah, if you're somebody who is willing to take the trek to get to those interconnected POVs after the 300-page mark, this book is for you. I would highly recommend it, especially because after spending so much time in my university classes reading really heavy reads, whether that's content-wise or page-wise, this book was much easier to digest, and it was a very fun read, so I would recommend. Epilogue. Well, what am I reading now? Well, with SCARLET going back onto my shelf until I inevitably do a reread later on, I am back in school. Woo! So if you didn't know, I'm an English literature major at the University of Toronto, Mississauga campus. And that means I have to read a lot of books. One of those books that I am currently reading for class is The Bluest Eyes by Toni Morrison. Boom. I will be doing a review for that on this series when I finish that. Another book that I am reading for one of my other classes, it's a Jane Austen studies class. It's so cool, is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. You can see my little sticky notes. I have to finish this book in the next 10 days. So I do have my readings set up for me. This is another book that I will be doing a spoiler-free review for on this series and on this channel. And last but not least, this is my fun book. This is Shielded by Caitlin Flanders, and I'm already, I believe, 1 or 2 chapters in. I'm right on chapter 3. So this is my digestible, fun fantasy read. It's also really popular on the YA scene, and I've heard a lot of good things about it. And yeah, I will also be doing a spoiler-free review for that here. So if you like this review, if you have any recommendations for me, or if you want to see more, tell me below in the comment section, and I can't wait to talk to you about my next 3 reads on this series, and I hope to see you all soon. Ciao for now, fiction fiends!